Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. In our last episode, we saw how time-consuming making a movie can be, even if it was shorter than 2 hours long. Next, Gary, Mal's son, was having trouble when the family moved out of Liverpool and into the London suburbs. Gary was getting picked on for his accent, and the way the Beatles monopolized his father's time meant that he couldn't spend more time with him. Mal got to meet some big stars when Ringo wanted him to go with him to Rome because he was making a movie called Candy. Mal really met some A-list celebrities, which was mind-blowing. Then, even more amazingly, he was on the cover of the Rolling Stone magazine with the cast of the Magical Mystery Tour. He was living the life, so let's see what's going on today. To celebrate the upcoming Magical Mystery Tour and its upcoming television debut, they held a party at the Royal Lancaster Hotel. There were several hundred guests, including full cast and crew, and they were among the attendees and all decked out in colorful and inventive costumes. Mal wrote there were cowboys galore, myself of course. There were nuns, several Charlie Chaplins, Paul and Jane arriving as the Pearly King and Queen, Ringo a Regency dandy, Maureen a Red Indian princess, John arrived as himself in a lot of leather gear, with George looking great in an Errol Flynn outfit, complete with tights and a sword. Patty was perfectly dressed as an Eastern princess. Dinner began fashionably at 9 p.m., a delightful full-scale pre-Christmas dinner with turkey and pudding, and Mel noted that, followed by dancing. Then there was entertainment from the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band, who would perform their song Death Cab Cutie during the movie striptease scene. And then there was a visit from Father Christmas himself. It was played by actor Robert Morley. And then everyone settled in for a special showing of Magical Mystery Tour in color and on a large screen. Mal wrote, "It was what it was, and nothing. It was what it was, and nothing. It didn't pretend to be. It's a vehicle for Beatle music and fantasy. I loved it, as did the other people there." But not everybody in the Beatles camp felt so positive about the movie. Peter Brown, the NIMS assistant, had seen the finished product and recommended that they mothball it, even suggesting that they write off the whole bloody business, which included some 40,000 pounds in production expenses, and move on with their lives. 5 days later, on Boxing Day, Magical Mystery Tour made its British television debut, this time in black and white, and on small screens across the nation. So much for the multicolored psychedelic feast for the eyes and ears. The reviews were devastating. Indeed, they were the first collectively unenthusiastic notices the Beatles had experienced. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, and what a fall it was, James Thomas wrote in the Daily Express. The whole boring saga confirmed a long-held suspicion of mine that the Beatles are four pleasant young men who have made so much money that they can apparently afford to be contemptuous of the public. Meanwhile, the Daily Mirror ridiculed Magical Mystery Tour as rubbish, piffle, nonsense. But the music, as always, was stellar. With Mal and Neil listed as editorial consultants for Apple, the soundtrack was released as a double EP for extended play, topping the British record charts, along with the single Hello Goodbye, backed with I Am the Walrus. The role was alive and well. Meanwhile, back on the weekend of November 11th, the group's artist friends, Simon and Margik, known together as The Fool, had begun painting a gigantic psychedelic mural on the corner of Baker and Paddington Streets in Marylebone, London. As the stunning image began to take form, it revealed the figure of a Native American chieftain in all his multicolored glory. The Fool hadn't bothered to apply for a license to paint the mural or obtain consent from the local council to undertake the venture, but these were seemingly trivial matters for the moment. With the mural in full bloom overhead, the Beatles had opened the Apple Boutique on 94 Baker Street. A massive crowd began congregating outside the retail shop, which specialized in fashion garments and accessories for swinging London. The crowd got so large that even Simon and Margik couldn't make their way inside. John, Paul, and George and their wives were holding court inside. John's boyhood friend, Pete Shotton, and Patty's sister Jenny had been tapped as managers for the store. where apparently everything was for sale, even down to the furniture and the fittings. In Paul's words, the Apple boutique would be a beautiful place where beautiful people can buy beautiful things. That's right, the boys were entering the rag trade. Rumors started about the Beatles' business empire and what direction they might take. With good reason, some critics were quick to question the Beatles' decision to try their hand at commercial enterprises outside their primary area of expertise. And what was this Apple business anyway? Music fans and record company insiders alike had noted the Beatles' hints throughout the year. Early reports had been circulating about the formation of such entities as Apple Music and Apple Records, with some even going so far as to suggest that Mal and Neil, the band's road managers no less, would be appointed to executive-level positions. Things were revealed in a December 23rd article in Billboard, which quoted longtime insider Terry Doran. The Beatles were discussing the formation of their own label, sharing the name of Apple, in 1968. The foursome had used the trade name for a company, Apple Holdings, which controls a music company, a newly opened boutique, and a production company. Mal was now to be a record executive? Mal hadn't seen it coming. Along with the likes of Neil and Alistair Taylor, he had joined the boys for a meeting in Brian's old boardroom at NIMS to divvy out the responsibilities associated with their new venture, vague as it may have been at the time. One of the group's first orders of business was to right an old wrong and to bring Derek Taylor back into the fold, and that's when it happened. Mal, acting as talent scout, as Apple's inaugural A&R man, came out of the blue. Mal later recalled Paul turning to me at one point and saying, "What are you doing these days, Mal?" "Well, Paul," was my reply, "not a whole lot of things. Things are pretty quiet, aren't they?" "Okay, then, you'll be a managing director of Apple Records." So Mal didn't know what a managing director did, but he didn't waste any time trying to figure it out. To his mind, he released it to seek out and assign new talent to the fledgling Apple Records label. Mal said the previous December the Apple boutique had opened on Baker Street. Mal said I was ensconced on the top floor auditioning new talent for Apple Records. Aspiring singers and musicians passed through my ears in that lonely office at the top of the building. I would record their efforts, and wanting to keep that personal touch going, I would write to them in my very handwriting, feeling that typewritten notes did not have the feel of Apple about them. Mal began to receive unsolicited material almost immediately. He wrote, "Typical was the singing cowboy," he wrote, with photographs showing the Apple aspiration, stripped naked to the waist, sitting on a horse with a large dog at his side, informing us that he rode onto the stage, leapt to the floor, and started singing. He would bring the house down. I believed him, but it wasn't quite what Apple was looking for. Apple, even in the label's earliest days, would be the place where raw, inexperienced artists would get their fair shake. Mal liked to joke that I had been whistling and singing around the halls of EMI recording studios for many years and had never been discovered. On writing that, he added, "I'm thinking of those early days on the road when I first drove the Beatles. Now I did like to entertain myself by singing, and at one point, forgetting who was sitting behind me, burst into song, only realizing when John piped up saying, 'Do you know you sound like Dean Martin? Mal, come on, give it to us again.'" When it came to his new position at Apple, Mal was serious. Mal was determined to devote all his energies to Apple Corp, the umbrella firm that would oversee several subsidiaries that the boys' original vision would grow to include Apple Records, Apple Retail, Apple Publishing, Apple Electronics, Apple Films, and Apple Studios. Mal had lunch in Marylebone Pub with Alistair Taylor. The Beatles had made him their general manager. So Mal wrote in his diary that Apple Records to be run by Derek Taylor and yours truly as co-managing directors. "This is a complete new venture for me, but with effort and help from my friends, all will be successful." Derek was to return to London on March 31st, 1968. Mal started sketching out several key points for Apple Records, including matters associated with distribution and record pressing, and how these aspects could interface with EMI. Apple Records UK distributor, as well as cover and label design for subsidiary products. Mal soon found out when it came to talent scouting, he wouldn't be left to his own devices. Over the Christmas holidays, Paul had proposed to his longtime girlfriend, Jane Asher. She had a 23-year-old brother named Peter, and he was taking a break from his work as a member of Peter and Gordon. Paul suggested that his future brother-in-law produce records for Apple. Peter shared Paul's vision regarding the ethical, even humanistic possibilities of Apple, a new kind of label with a much more generous and respectful attitudes towards artists than was current at the time, so Asher accepted the offer. The next day, Paul upped the ante, saying, "Well, why don't you become the head of A&R?" Peter replied, "Sure, great, I'd love to," figuring that this was the way that Apple was being set up for the time. The only other person appointed to Apple Records in any capacity was Mal Evans, who was there in a general manager capacity. Peter didn't have a problem working closely with Mal. Over the years, he had become friendly with the roadie, if for no other reason than that when it came to the Beatles, he was always there. He didn't say much, but he was extremely affable, Peter recalled. You got the impression that he was solid, that he was reliable. Most significantly, you realized that his affection for the Beatles was unquestionable. He wanted to be invaluable, Peter added, and he was. Peter noticed that Mal's approach to life with the Beatles versus Neil, and Peter felt that Mal was reactive. He would do what he was asked to do, and Neil was more proactive. So while Mal was the guy who, when a Beatle said he wanted something, made sure it happened, Neil was the guy who would figure out what a Beatle wanted before he even knew it. Apple added personnel by the day, and space was already at a premium. On January 22, 1968, the company entered into a one-year lease for offices on the 4th floor of 95 Wigmore Street in the West End, which would serve as an inaugural headquarters of Apple Corps, if only temporarily. Mal celebrated by ordering a desk for the first time in his life. By the time the office furniture arrived on February 1st, the Apple staff was already under fire from other Wigmore Street tenants for playing records during business hours. Not being able to listen to music to scout out potential talent for the Apple records was a professional handicap, and Mal simply couldn't afford that. And the complaints left him having to shuffle back and forth between Apple's operations on Baker and Wigmore Streets. Mal wanted to make this new opportunity work. He even tried his hand at designing a logo that captured the essence of Apple Corp. They had been looking for something to express the feeling of being completely self-contained, as all facets of the business they were involved in would be gathered together under one roof. Mal recalled Mal came up with the 3 candidates for his colleagues' consideration, including a design that featured a bulbous uppercase orange A outlined in the shape of a green apple, a circular design with the word Apple in caps written large and bold and pink letters against a yellow background, and finally a burgundy capital A set against a green apple. Any consideration that Mal's drawing might possibly have received would be short-lived. Paul had a Magritte painting of an apple, Mal said, and everybody agreed it would be the ideal logo for the Beatles' new company. Mal and Neil worked out of the Wigmore Street office. They didn't waste any time in transforming Paul's vision into reality. Richard DeLillo, Apple's 22-year-old American house hippie, recalled a meeting that the former roadie turned record executive held with London ad man Gene Mahan. Neil told Gene that he wanted a photograph of an apple for a record label, said DeLillo. Well, that seemed simple enough. Suddenly, on the pickup in that one instant, Mahan's flash came to him. It was one of those illuminating rushes in which the entire design universe opened up. Listen, he said, why don't we have the A side of the record as completely whole apple with no writing on it whatsoever? On the B side, we can have an apple sliced in half with all the label copy. In DeLillo's memory, it was the ultimate acid purist design concept for the record label. So Neil and Mal looked at him and quietly and nodded silently, knowing genius when they saw it. Mal spent a few weeks listening to unsolicited material in his Baker Street office. Then he decided to take matters into his own hands. He wanted to sign the Perishers, formerly known as the Seftons, whom he had known from his friendship with bass player Norm Bellis. The Perishers had even cut an acetate for their song How Does It Feel? Mal was unable to drum up any interest for the group at Apple. Mal recalled his March 1967 meeting with Bill Collins at the Bag. He had wanted the opportunity to hear the Ivies, the Welsh band Collins had been so high on. So Mal didn't have to wait very long. On Monday, January 22nd, he got things rolling during a lunch with Bill. 2 days later, Mal shared his intentions with Peter, Neil, and Paul during a series of meetings at Apple. He also learned, although he had not begun to panic, trusting in the boys as he did, to have faith in him, that Apple Records was now Derek, Peter, and Mal. Scarcely a month earlier, the job had been seemingly his alone. Thursday, January 25th, Mal was on his way with Bill to see the Ivies perform at the Marquee, a trendy Soho club on Wardour Street. In Mal's memory, the roadie recalled Peter Asher joining him that night at the Marquee. Ivy's bassist, Ron Griffiths, would never forget the moment Mal entered the club. We had just finished our regular wind up the audience and have a laugh with them when this giant bloke came up at the end with Bill. We recognized him because we'd seen pictures of magazines from years gone by. We were thrilled because that meant that was the nearest we'd get to the Beatles at that time, but apparently Peter had seen enough. According to Mal, when the Ivies had finished their first set, Peter gave them the thumbs down, telling me that they weren't worth listening to and didn't stand a chance of making anything of themselves. Mal wasn't giving up, he said to himself. That's what you think, Peter, boy. Mal had a funny feeling up his spine, and he listened to it, and he stayed for the second set, which was indeed a lot better. Mal decided to believe in himself after the show. He said, I played executive, buying the Ivies and their manager Bill Collins a round of drinks. My mouth tends to run away with me when I get enthusiastic about something, but what I like, the public likes. A few nights later, Mal treated Bill and the Ivies to dinner, hoping to get them as his first major Apple signing. Ron Griffiths remembered that we were up till all hours of the morning playing our demos. Mal was impressed with their sound and that they composed their own music. Mal couldn't get over the variety of songs, said Griffiths. We were pouring drinks and he started to pass a joint around. He was the first person to ever make it available to us. I didn't enjoy it. At this point, the joint came around to Peter Hand, the band's lead singer and guitarist, who was wary of smoking weed. But it was a different story when it came to Tom Evans, the Ivies' guitarist. Tom certainly got into it, Griffiths recalled. January 30th, Mal had a chance meeting with Bill at the Marylebone pub, and over lunch they began discussing the contours of a potential Apple deal for the Ivies. Bill named his terms. In Mal's memory, the Ivies manager said that a contract with EMI should be a percentage of the top to cover overheads. Examples, artist fee for pressing and distribution and promoting it, etc. Then remaining percentage to be split 50-50 between record company and Apple. It was pretty standard stuff. Bill didn't know it, but Mal had already struck out back at the office. He was playing the Ivies demo reel to anybody that would listen. Mike Berry, a new member of the Apple's publishing team, liked the Ivies sound. He said, I gave Paul McCartney my personal Ivies demo tape, but Paul said he didn't see anything in it. Mal would time and time again prime the pump for the Ivies, hoping to impress the boys, Paul especially, about the Ivies' incredible potential. Mal recalled, for 6 months I brought tapes into Apple, playing them for the fellas and being rejected. As time wore on, he became even more determined. He said, I mentally dug my heels in, determined to prove to all these people that I was right. So I will end the video here. So Mal got to enjoy the party for the Magical Mystery Tour, and the psychedelic movie didn't give the same vision on a small black and white TV. The critics didn't like the film at all. After that, the Beatles created Apple. They had a store which sold clothes. Then they had a record-producing company, and Mal was made managing director of Apple Records, Paul had told him, and he wasn't alone. Derek Taylor was called in to run Apple Records, and Mal was to be co-managing director. Paul then decided to ask his future brother-in-law, Peter Asher, to run A&R, and Mal was general manager. So it got a little confusing on the changing titles that Mal had. Then it sounded like he became a talent scout and wanted to get the Ivy sign, but no one at Apple was interested. Mal was excited by the changes. He had a chance to show his talent in a different way, and hopefully he got a raise. They never said if he did so far. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't subscribed, if you could do so, it would help the channel to grow, as well as giving it a thumbs up. It's all a great help. And if you haven't clicked on the notification bell, if you could do that, it lets you know when a video is posted. More importantly, I want to wish everyone a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of the Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.